Hello and welcome to The Album Man, and today we're going to be talking about Monochrome by Daniel Cavanagh. I'm going to stick with the pronunciation Cavanagh because I'm really not sure how you say his surname. So there we go, do tell me if I'm wrong in the comments, I'm sure people will anyway. So this year it's been quite an eventful one for the folks at Anathema. They released their latest album, The Optimist, which I really loved and is one of my favourite albums of the year, though I get the sense it received a little bit of a mixed reception perhaps in the fan base, maybe due to the use of slightly more electronic elements, maybe because of less reliance on huge crescendos. I'm not quite sure because I really enjoyed it. They've been doing a world tour. I saw them live in Shepherd's Bush about a month ago, which was wonderful. But now the primary songwriter and lead guitarist, Daniel Cavanagh, has a new solo record out. Now previously Danny has done a few solo things here and there. He did a covers record I think the other year, which I remember on Pledge Music, and I listened to a couple of songs from it and it was alright, but I guess covers aren't really my thing unless they're done in a particularly different, radically interesting way, then otherwise I'm just not quite sure I always see the point of them. But when I heard that Monochrome was going to be a collection of entirely original songs, I anticipated it with bated breath. So in starting to talk about Monochrome, it's really difficult to start with anything else but the two standout tracks on the album. These are The Exorcist and The Silent Flight. So let's begin with the latter. This is a sprawling, multi-layered 9-minute epic, and it's like nothing else I've really heard in anywhere in Anathema's discography, or just Danny's as a songwriter. The first 4 minutes of this ambient, melancholic melody is played on the piano, and as the song progresses through these first 4 minutes, a kind of a gentle drum beat is adding, pulsating softly through the song. The tension begins gently to build and subside, before around the 4-minute mark, I'd say, a gently picked acoustic guitar is accompanied by what reminds me of the backwards vocals on Radiohead's Daydreaming from Moon-Shaped Pool. Now the most interesting element here is the use of a distinct Moog sound echoing throughout, particularly towards the latter portion of the song. And then after the tension subsides, you kind of get this third act. I'd say you can almost say this song is into 3 rather distinct but still very musically coherent acts. And the third act could honestly almost be mistaken as part of a Godspeed You Black Emperor song. It's very post-rock inspired, and that's really the strength of this song. It's its razor-sharp post-rock focus. It's sprawling, moving, multi-layered, and to maybe no vocals, at least the play forward, but that does not detract at all from the overall aesthetic as the piece snakes in and out, captivating the listener. The song also subverts the usual Anathema crescendo trope with its various builds and resolutions. No, not to critique the element that's been such a huge part of their sound ever since really We're Here Because We're Here, but it's just rather refreshing to hear Danny kind of go out of his comfort zone. Though The Exorcist, the other standout track on the album, I would say this moves in a more classic way from slow piano build to mighty crescendo, certainly reminding listeners of Weather System's era Anathema. But what makes this song so striking is Danny's vocal performance. Though his vocals across the record are sparse compared with a standard Anathema release, which is usually rather vocal heavy with both Vincent and Lee, the emotive resonation of just every lyric and word sung by Danny here means that it's almost impossible, especially for this song, not to move you. It really is Danny's songwriting at his best, and while doing nothing out of the ordinary sonically, it's just difficult not to adore, not to be captivated by the atmosphere created here. Apparently this song is about his mother, a subject that has permeated much of Anathema's career with songs such as One Last Goodbye and Are You There? And yet again, out of great pain, Danny manages to bring great beauty. And now I know some will be thinking, especially after my analysis of The Exorcist, you know, what does this album have to offer that other Anathema albums don't? You know, why does this exist as a solo release? And I think that's a fair question. But what it does do to differentiate itself as a distinct solo record and not just another Anathema album is a number of things. So you have a song like Soho, and I guess also This Music, which structurally are very Anathema-y, quote unquote, especially when kind of compared with Silent Flight. But the album does have its own quirks. So the vocal talents of Anneke van Giersberg are employed to great effect on certainly both Soho and This Music. And if, like me, you probably will know her, especially from her work with Devin Townsend and now her own band Ver. And while female vocals have certainly never been a stranger to Anathema with Lee Douglas, Anneke has a distinct voice, and her performances contrast Danny's voice brilliantly. There's this great deal of light and shade and push and shove, and just a wonderful dynamic created with their voices. However, Soho, while an enjoyable song and certainly similar to, I'd say, something you'd find on Distant Satellites, it just feels a bit more like a cut that just couldn't quite make that album, until maybe the last third, when Danny's voice really plays to its strengths, in this quiet, reflective, moody piece that you get at the end after the crescendo subsides. Because one of the problems on this record is that when the songs go full on into the Anathema style crescendos, you do kind of miss, I guess, the ability of either Vincent or Lee to really take those songs to the next level. Danny's voice, while brilliant at moody, subtle pieces, is perhaps not as strong at elevating a song as his brother. Another change worth noting is the use of violin, both in Silent Flight and especially in Dawn with Anathema playing. And I kind of wished that Anna was utilised a bit more on this album. She differentiates the songs nicely, adds an extra texture that we haven't really seen Danny use before, particularly in Dawn. This is especially prevalent as the song moves to a almost Irish folk section. It's lively, got a really loose, free vibe to it, a bit of a Nick Drake vibe to it, and it's really accentuated by the subtle use of Danny's voice. It's just a nice change of pace on the record. I guess that the other primary element of this album that really needs to be talked about is the idea of this being a dark, introspective and moody album. And some of that is true, but some of it's not. Certainly, this is an album, I would argue, that is best enjoyed in the evening, preferably alone, maybe walking through a park or along by a beach or just being around nature. In a city, I mean, it can work. You know, I live in London, so I don't really have much choice of beaches and parks, well, that don't have a lot of people in, I guess. But this is the setting where a song like Oceans of Time really hits its mark. The idea of this album being openly dark is one that I find potentially misleading, because moody and dark are not synonyms, and as with much of Danny's music, there is a distinct uplifting quality underlying most of it. A dark record is maybe something like, say, take Sufjan Stevens' Carrying Low, where Sufjan's wailing we're all gonna die over this moody minimalist backdrop, and that's a place where moody and just darkness really coincide. But while heavy themes and regret and the like are touched and explored on Monochrome, something like Oceans of Time provides a very hopeful message, and so does Dawn and This Music, and the album is certainly reflective, and I think that Danny himself in an interview best described the way in which it can be said to be deep. He said, "It's deep and introspective, but it's not fucking War and Peace. What is deep is people being deep." And that's one of the big strengths of this album, and I guess the comparison I draw here is something like Sigur Ros's Brackets. So Sigur Ros's Brackets is an album which is not, I mean, Sigur Rós usually sing in Icelandic, but this is sung in Hopelandic, which is a made-up variant on Icelandic. It's impossible to understand. It's gobbledygook. It doesn't mean anything. But it's an album I find incredibly, incredibly deep. Why? Because it provides a vehicle for the listener's own emotions and reflection. Instead of just being an account of exactly how the songwriter's feeling. It instead provides you with a blank canvas to kind of paint your own emotions. Because with some bands, I guess, yeah, you feel like you're observing their emotions, like they're wearing their heart on their sleeve, and you can feel how they feel. And others, like Monochrome, it's just like looking into a mirror. Despite the praise I've been giving this album, there are some problems. I really just don't get the final track, Some Dreams Come True. I find it utterly boring, unengaging, 8.5 minutes of music. It's best described as an ambient soundscape, but the problem is that it just lacks the clear focus of the rest of the songs. Instead, this just meanders without going anywhere. And Danny's certainly brilliant at creating journeys, as in The Silent Flight, and even, you know, that's not to say that a journey has to end in some big lush crescendo or something, or in some Godspeed-like way. It just has to at least be an interesting journey. But Some Dreams, it's just like it's like the waves of the sea that it, I guess, so aptly samples. It moves in and out and doesn't really go anywhere. It has its moments of serenity, but it just fails to inspire anything that countless other Anathema tracks haven't succeeded in doing far better, especially at its incredible length. It does bog the album down a bit. In conclusion, Monochrome is an album certainly worth checking out. It's a more serene, atmospheric and reflective album than The Optimist, and if you weren't a fan of The Optimist, this is quite different, so I'd definitely recommend it, and if you were, I'd also recommend it. This is not quite up there with Anathema's best works, it's not Weather Systems Part 2, but for the most part, it sets out, you know, it achieves what it sets out to accomplish. It's an emotional, beautiful, in parts 40-odd minute record that, despite falling into some of the same old tropes we've had in Anathema at times, it's a rather cohesive record, and I give it a 7 out of 10 and recommend it to those who want something a little more understated from Anathema's main man. This has been The Album Man. Thanks for watching me talk about Monochrome by Daniel Cavanagh, and as usual, long live rock and roll.